Should bass players change their strings once every couple of weeks or once every month to be considered a professional bass player? Let me give you my opinion. I gotta chill for a second now, 'cause the vibe's so smooth when I break it down. I'm back on the record now, like I never left. Yeah, I'm back for a second round. Second round. Second round. Second round. I gotta chill for a second now, 'cause the vibe's so smooth when I break it down. I'm back on. A few weeks ago, I put up a funny post on my IG page. At the time, actually, to be honest, I honestly thought that I was the only person that did this, because you hear all the time that, oh yeah, real bass players should change their strings. If you want to be considered a professional bass player, you need a new pair of strings on your bass every time you step foot in the studio, every time you do a tour or whatever. So I put up this post. Let me read it right here. Am I the only person that changes bass strings once every 3 years? And that's actually a serious question, because I've always been taught that you should have new sets of strings on your bass. But through the years of me being an active bass player, I found out that it's nothing wrong with having a set of strings on your bass that's been on there for a couple of years. And I'm going to read some of these comments. And I actually thought that I was the only person that actually did this. But apparently, according to these comments, oh my God, you guys are funny. This one guy said, I keep them until they break. I still use a 10-year-old flat ones. Okay, that beat me. Okay, 10 years, I probably would have changed it at least 2 or 3 times within 10 years. This other comment, I have a jazz bass. The strings are more than 25 years old. I would really love to hear that jazz bass. And I can probably guarantee you that bass sounds monstrous. Cause I'm not sponsored by Fender, but Fender makes some dope stuff. 3 years is too often for me. And this is actually a bad, crazy bass player himself. I know this guy personally. B-Dub, you can check this guy out on YouTube. This guy has an amazing tone on the bass. 3 years. This is a comment that I actually like. Note, depending on the sound you're going for is good. And I'm going to elaborate more on that. And this other comment, I am a decade with my 5-string. 10 years. Another comment, 10 years. So I guess 10 years is like the standard for people changing their strings. And wait, you're supposed to change your strings? Yeah, this guy is hilarious, man. And I like this comment. Dirt keeps the funk, James Jamerson. And I want to elaborate on it. My opinion about changing strings. First of all, when I was coming up, I used to change my strings all the time. I used to, first of all, I used to break them. So of course I needed to change them. So I used to play super hard. I felt like, the harder I played, the better. And I used to just play hard for no reason. Just beat the bass up. And I used to break strings like once every week, maybe 2 weeks. And I was probably like, 17, 18 years old, breaking string. I can't even remember the last time I broke a string now, because I play super light now. I used to buy strings all the time, and I used to break them. Or if I didn't break them, I felt like they needed to sound new. So I used to actually boil the strings, because, when I was a teenager, I didn't have money all the time to just keep buying strings. I was working at Wendy's. So here's my opinion about buying new strings and being considered a professional bass player. You don't always need to change your strings all the time to be considered a professional bass player. And I know there's a lot of people out here that says, before you step foot in the studio, you need to have a new pair of strings. Before you do, a tour, you need to have a new pair of strings. Of course, you need extra strings if you go on tour, just in case if you break them. But don't feel that you have to have fresh new sets of strings on your bass every gig. You see what I'm saying? Depending on the style of music. So for instance, if I'm gonna do if I'm called to the studio to do a hip hop record with a hip hop artist, I'm not going to go in the studio with a new fresh pair of strings on my bass. It's not gonna happen. With my experience of doing records over and over again, it's just not gonna work. What's gonna happen is the producer or the artist may pick up on the bass sound and they may be like, oh yeah, you know, the bass sound is not working, or do you have another bass? If I was to get called to play with an artist, let's say like Adele or somebody, I'm not gonna go on her gig with new fresh sets of strings. You know, for her style of music, the dark tone of her music, it's just not gonna work. You can probably get by, but in order to complement that style of music and to capture that tone and that color of that sound that Adele has, you're gonna need some grit on your bass. Not the bright kind of grit, but the dark sound of the grit, if that makes sense. Me going in to try to play an Adele song with a bright sounding clicky bass, it's just not gonna work, you know. So you have to think about the sound that you are going for, and you have to think about the color of the music that you're gonna be performing. Every style of music does not require new strings on your bass. So you as a bass player, you have to make a decision on what the song calls for, what the gig calls for, and the type of sound and color that your bass needs in order to bring that music to life. I'm gonna make another video on bringing music to life as a bass player as well in future videos. So what style of music would I personally use new strings for? Probably the only style of music that I would even consider like really changing my strings for is metal, but that's rare for me. Sometimes I just keep my dead strings on my bass when I do metal music. A lot of metal producers would be like, oh yeah, you know, you need to have new sets of strings so the bass can cut through the guitars and this, that, and the other. But you don't, you know, I've done plenty of metal songs and metal gigs with, I'm talking about with 2-year-old strings, you know, and my bass cut through just fine. And the thing that I personally find with having older strings on my bass is that sometimes it just adds vibe to my tone. It adds color, darkness to my tone in a way that I like. A lot of times I don't like a bright sounding bass, even though I do some slapping here and there and I do a lot of tapping and things like that. I would rather have my bass not so bright, but have a little darker sound in a little more like in the lower mids, in the upper mids, but not trebly. That's just a personal taste of mine, but everyone's taste is different when it comes to that type of stuff. But you have to find out what works for you and what's best for your sound. Everyone's sound is different. Everyone have their own preference, but don't feel as though you're not being a professional bass player if you don't have a fresh new pair of strings on your bass. Speaking of which, Dean Markley actually sent me, I don't know, 8 pair of new strings, I think back in like 2016, 17 or something like that. And I still have packages left over. So the thing I want you guys to take away from this video today is that I don't want you to feel as though you have to go out, spend extra money, buy a new fresh pair of strings in order to be considered a professional bass player. But hey, if you want a nice slappy, clicky sound, hey, get you a fresh new pair of strings. But if you want like a soul, gritty, bluesy, R&B-ish sound, you know, let the strings rust, you know, let the strings age. And when you start recording and working with those type of artists that do this style of music, I guarantee it, they will love it. They will love that sound. So I just want to say thank you guys for watching. If you have taken anything from this video, leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you change your strings once every year, once every 2 years, once every 10 years, like some people, according to my friends on Instagram? Make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification button as well. Thank you guys for watching.